at Miami, and she's graduating this May with a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and Management. So I'm going to turn it over to Skylar.
Okay, I would like to welcome you all today to a panel of lovely women here to talk about being a woman in engineering and computing. We have Amy Augustine, who graduated Miami in 1998 with a degree in engineering management and manufacturing, and she currently holds a role as the Senior Director of Network Supply Chain at US Cellular. Asha Montante graduated Miami in 2008 with a degree in engineering management and currently works as the Director of Quality and Safety for Swagelok Manufacturing Company. And Disha Patel graduated in 2002 with a degree in computer science and systems analysis and was recently appointed the Digital Technology and Innovation Site Lead for Amgen's newest manufacturing investment here in Ohio. So I would love to start out with a question that allows us to get more background on the panelists. So let's start with your experiences. Can you share where your career took you after graduating Miami and kind of what inspired you to continue a career in engineering and computing after school?
That's great. I'll go ahead and start. Hi, everyone. Disha Patel. It's great to be here back on campus and taking a trip down memory lane. Before I actually answer the question of what I did after Miami, I'll focus a little bit on what inspired me to get into technology, computer science, and just in the STEM profession in general. When I was younger, I had an aptitude for math and science. It just came naturally to me, right? And it was something that I found joy and passion in everything that I did. I just seemed to always stay interested. What then propelled me was also very strong mentorship and guidance from my father, who was also a software engineer. And having those two valuable, like one, the aptitude and the desire for it, as well as strong mentorship, really inspired me to want to take on and further explore computer science and technology. Then I had the very awesome opportunity to actually do an internship while I was in high school with the United States Air Force, where I got to program and learn how to problem solve for the first time and actually apply it to something real. And that really gave me some satisfaction and excitement. And that really helped me understand that maybe I should potentially go for a career or at least major in something with engineering or technology. So then went through a bunch of school visits and tours and tried to find the right place for me, and that was Miami University. What really drove me to Miami University was the fact of the strong engineering program, but also the liberal arts education that was coupled with it. So that's what really got me to Miami. When I was at Miami, Miami prepares you very well for the degrees that you're going to obtain, as well as just the life experiences, and prepares you to be ahead of the curve when you get out of Miami. So I actually also had the opportunity while at Miami to intern and do an internship in Portugal. So I did an international experience. That got me even more excited about potentially the impact that technology can have even globally, right? So that really took me on to then graduating with my degrees in computer science and systems analysis. And then from there, I was one of those folks that had the opportunity either to continue my education for a master's degree or go into corporate America. And I feel fortunate that I actually had the option to do both, either or. And I got accepted to the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. And that was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And through conversations with mentors that I even built in the corporate world, they encouraged me, Disha, this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Take the Cambridge opportunity. So I was able to couple my technology degree with a business degree. And I felt that really rounded me out. And then I entered corporate America and first worked at Eli Lilly Company. There, I really got this passion and understanding of how you use technology to advance human health. And I found passion in that. And that's what really propelled me to stay in the healthcare industry from my time at Eli Lilly Company, where I was in Singapore. I got the opportunity to work in Singapore. And that international experience was also another great opportunity. Then I got the opportunity to move to Los Angeles, California and work for Amgen. That's where I've been for the past 16 years. So that's a long time at a company. But as you'll hear me speak about Amgen, I'm really excited and fortunate to be part of a company that's advancing human health. And specifically, I've held different variety of technology roles over the past 16 years while at Amgen. And currently, as Skylar indicated, I'm coming back to Ohio from LA to help start up our new digitally advanced manufacturing site in Ohio. So that's my story. I'll hand it to you, Amy.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Amy Augustine, and like Skylar said, I graduated in '98. Back then, when folks were graduating, you went into two industries, the auto industry or consulting. And I ended up kind of taking a little bit of a different path, and you'll kind of hear that throughout my career journey. I ended up working for a company called Integraph Corporation as a systems engineer, implementing drawing control systems for Procter & Gamble. And so I got the travel bug, loved the job, loved doing system implementations, but I also loved the travel piece. And so with only 18 months of experience, I started posting for jobs with consulting firms and got a job with KPMG. And here's a lesson for you. The job description said 5 years minimum experience. I had 18 months, got the job. So you don't always have to check every box on that job description. Loved it. I actually had 2 clients my whole time with KPMG. One on the West Coast, Applied Materials. I was there for 6 months and then spent 4.5 years working with the US Army, implementing SAP and modernizing their supply chain systems. It's hard to believe that the Army was using a green screen dot matrix system that was homegrown in the 60s. And I can't even tell you how many times the story I was told the Chinese had hacked it like 5 times. So we were there to basically create new processes and roll out a new supply chain system. Hence how I got into supply chain from engineering. So with that, after 5 years of 100% of being on the road, and I know the guys at lunch talked about being a million miler. I'm a million miler. My body just couldn't take it, right? Like it just work-life balance. I had a boyfriend at the time. We were talking about getting married. He's now my husband. He did not want a weekend wife. I needed a career change. I found a local consulting firm in Chicago called the Revere Group. It actually was a great fit for me at the time. I spent 3 years there doing, I would say, working with many different clients, small and large, everything from pharmaceuticals to computer companies, and just learning more about the supply chain, doing everything from strategic sourcing to material master updates in SAP, the gamut of different stuff. And what was awesome about that was I was everything for the project manager, the consultant, the leader. It was just a huge learning experience for me. And I'll share this with everybody. In 2008, if you were in the working world, right, the recession hit. I lost my job with that company. But it didn't, I used my network, right? And I networked with friends, former coworkers. I did a lot of research online, and I found this great company based out of Chicago where I was living at the time called US Cellular. And they had a role for a senior business analyst. And I'm like, all right, it sounds like something I can do. And, you know, as engineers, we're really good about asking questions, right? And that's what this job was about, was I would have to go in, work with the business, ask questions and understand the requirements for everything from a new product, so like a phone in the box that we would sell at Walmart, to system enhancements. And I was, to be honest, really good at that. So I got hired, I think it was within 3 weeks from submitting my resume to interviews, I had a job offer from them. So I started there. I spent about 2.5 years doing that role in their enterprise program management office. And at the time, the company was very kind of regional focused. So we had a lot of functions that were done in the regions, and they were bringing that back to the corporate office in Chicago. And they finally stood up a supply chain department. And I was like, wait, I know supply chain, I can do this. And so I moved to supply chain as a supply chain effectiveness manager. And basically I was an internal consultant. And so continued kind of the work that I did in the enterprise program management office, but for the supply chain department. After 2 years, a leadership role opened up, and I knew I wanted to be a leader at this company. and I became the leader of the reverse logistics team. And what that entailed was returns management. So everything that was returned to the stores or returned online, I had responsibility for down in our DC. Test and repair of devices. So here I'm getting back into engineering because that basically was a mini remanufacturing line that I had responsibility for. So working with Samsung, Apple, LG, Motorola, making sure that we could repair the phones and redeploy them for our service programs. And then what we called recommerce. So a lot of those returns that we make, we don't resell, right? And so I didn't want to put anything into a landfill. So 100% of what we couldn't reuse in our own supply chain, I had to go sell on the secondary markets and making sure that we didn't put it in the landfill. So I did that role, I want to say almost for 5 years, and I got an inline promotion. And leadership at US Cellular was talking to me about, you know, you're ready to be a director, we just have to find the right fit. So a director role opened up in corporate business strategy. I took a risk. Here's again, I didn't check all the boxes on the job description. I applied, I interviewed, I got the job. So I went for, if you think about it, the back end of the business, all the way up to do corporate strategy. Everything from looking at spectrum to how are we going to get customers to building decks for board of directors, right? So fantastic experience. I wasn't even in that role 6 months and they told me I was moving back to supply chain. And so within, I guess, a year and 5 months of being the director of business strategy for US Cellular, I was moved back to supply chain as a director of network supply chain and indirect procurement. And so I had to stand up a new team with my new leader to support our small cell implementations that we were going on. And so fantastic experience of having to go out and find the right resources, writing job descriptions, going to the CFO and CEO and getting capital for this headcount. Totally different experience, and it's has like loved every second of it. Last fall, my leader at the time moved to engineering. Within a week, I got a call with offering me the role that I currently sit, which now I have responsibility for basically everything that has to do with building our cellular network and supply chain. So sourcing of backhaul, dark fiber, the tower crews, to working with Ericsson, Nokia, and other suppliers and making sure we have the radios and the power cabinets and everything that we need to do to build out our wireless network to support our customers. And that also included, I actually got to do an org change and go through that whole process, right? And problem solve and figure out how do I take a team that is used to doing one type of work and really mature it and make it a much better operation where we can drive cost savings and deliver for our partners in engineering.
Okay, so I'm a little boring in my career then. So I am a creature of habit. You know, my father was an engineer, definitely inspired me in terms of like the hard work ethic and what I loved. Looking back at my childhood, I loved the problem solving. Like that's what stands out to me. It wasn't necessarily about the math or the science. I was one, like if I studied, I'd get it, right? But it was more about the problem solving. I also probably didn't realize this then. I learned this later in career. A mentor once told me there's a couple types of people in the world. There's people that live to work because they're passionate about the work that they do. And there's people that work to live. And you kind of need to know what type of person you are. And I was one. I wanted to have the hobbies, the work-life balance. I knew that early, so I worked to live. And so a career in STEM and in engineering specifically seemed to be something that would fit my future goals and aspirations and lifestyle. So Miami also was something familiar to my family. My sister went here. She's a Miami merger, so my brother-in-law has a long line of family members that went here too. Always fell in love with the campus like from day one. So that's kind of how I got here. To be honest, I started as a computer science major. I couldn't pass whatever CSA 174 with the Java programming. I took it twice and just barely passed that second time. And one of my dorm mates said, why don't you go talk to Dr. Atuni? He's the chair of the Department of Mechanical Manufacturing Engineering. Talk to him about engineering management. I'm in it. I love it. Like, go talk to him. So I talked to him. And instantaneously, like, if you knew him, you knew what a mentor he was to students. He helped encourage me, like, come take some classes, shadow some students. And so I switched majors, and I'm so happy I did, because I think it helped me realize I definitely am not a technical engineer. I don't want to design things. I love the problem solving. I could complement that with an engineering management degree and go on to do some different things. So that's kind of Miami. Dr. Tooney also was always looking out for what I felt was my best interests. And he was very close with Swagelok, and he had some corporate relationships and folks that he trusted there. So he had recommended Swagelok talk to me at Career Fair, and I wanted to at least get back to the Cleveland area, which is where I'm from. So I spoke with a couple folks at Swagelok, did some interviews. Again, creature of habit. I'm like, all right, go back home, kind of hang out there. So started with the company in an engineering role, and my career is all Swagelok. And so I definitely moved within Swagelok, and I'll share that here in a second, but I wouldn't trade that experience for the world. I've gotten a bunch of diverse experiences, so similar to what these ladies shared, being an engineer, being stretched to go to planning and supply chain, which I know nothing about, is fish out of water, right? But leaning back to the problem solving, leaning back to how I leveraged the relationships that I built, the collaboration, all those skill sets that I got out of the program here really helped, propel me in that area. So after planning and scheduling, I went back into corporate quality assurance, project engineering, so managing our capital portfolio and landing new equipment. The role that I loved the most, that really gave me some broader business insight and again stretched me, was supplier development engineering. So now this is where I got the experience outside of Swagelok. I got to see companies in all different industries: injection molding, raw material, tubing, like just getting to see different businesses, different industries, sizes of businesses, cultures. We've aligned with a lot of people that are similar to us in values, but it really speaks volumes when you can see what's happening beyond the four walls of Swagelok. So did that for a few years, and I like to stay put. Swagelok pushes people to take new opportunities. So after 3 years, I was getting the question, so what's next, Asha? What's next? And I think it was finally time there. I gotta stretch myself. I was asked to take a role as the manufacturing strategies manager, which at Swagelok is very different, very challenging. You're thinking 3 to 5 years out, where is the company going with manufacturing? What's our footprint look like? Are we going to stay in Northeast Ohio? Do we expand? How does that affect our labor? We're a heavily labor dependent company, which we're trying to change with some of the automation and strategies there, but it was definitely a unique role. But as soon as I got comfortable, 8 months into the role, I was asked to take the role that I'm currently in now as Director of Quality, Environmental Health and Safety. If you asked me if I would ever take this role, I would have said no. There's nothing exciting about quality and safety, especially after we just got through a pandemic. Why would you ever want to go into safety? But I'm really happy in the role. I think that there's a lot of opportunity. I'm encouraged by our executive leadership. They're really pushing us to do different things. So, I feel confident in the skill sets that I've had, not only from Miami, but also through, growing up with Swagelok, that it's set me up for success, and I can definitely push myself out of my comfort zone, and I'll succeed.
Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yes.
First question, Skylar, do you have a job?
I do not.
Okay, let's come some.
No, I can't do that.
Impressive experiences. I'm curious, can you share maybe an experience where, we get caught up in stereotypes, assumptions, maybe some experience that stuck out with you where, there was a misguided stereotype or a reaction, in particular between male colleagues, because I find, that you were trying to figure out the dynamic and color how, how females should or would behave versus what males would or would behave. Like, I'm just really interested in your perspective. Like, can you share an example of what has happened in your careers?
I have an example if you guys want. So, not to be crude, the the biggest thing that comes out of my mind is watching my male counterparts and how they're assertive versus when I'm assertive, it's a little aggressive. And I've got a coworker here that can attest to that. Like at work, I think people either love working with me or they're scared of me. So to be honest, because it's a fine line. And I think what I found really helpful from my male peers that I collaborate well with is when they help support that. Like, no, that's not assertive, that's direct. And there's nothing wrong with being direct because it's not disrespectful. So I felt like that is a difference in stereotype that is still very evident today, that is hard unless you have a strong network around you to kind of surpass.
That's a great question, Nate, and thanks for asking it. For me, I feel like the areas that I've been, the companies that I've been involved in and everything, they've been very supportive of women and advancing women and trying to help understand some of the general stereotypes that might exist between a male and female counterpart. Actually, I think one of my more, when we talk about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, it's more than just male, female. You know, I think about it in all multiple dimensions, both from a visible perspective and an invisible perspective. And for me, I think one of the more barriers that I had to deal with was being younger. So the generational differences. And I think, I think now in our industry, we have like 4 generations spanning from baby boomers all the way to the Gen Z's, Y's, X's, and I think for me it was, how do I have a voice earlier in my career and being able to be respected for that input and perspective. And I think that one was more something had to work with the teams that I worked with to help understand that value could be brought even if you're out of college and can make an impact still. So that's another example, not necessarily male, female, but another perspective.
The one example that I have that resonates for me is when I started my consulting career. And so, number one, being a very young female, and I go to my first client, and my assignment is, will you just basically push paper, right? And I was like, well, I didn't take this job to push paper, right? Like, I have more to bring in that. And I felt like I had to prove myself a little bit more to the senior manager that was running the project that, no, I can do process work. I can help document what we need to do. I don't want to be a paper pusher. And that took me a good month, and probably month to 2 months. But I noticed like the male counterparts, my peers who were consultants, like right away were able to jump in and do process work. And so I think that was a little bit of where I had an uphill battle being a female versus not a male.
Awesome. Yes.
Amy, I know specifically mentioned taking a risk, and Asha mentioned taking a role she hadn't, thought of. Can you guys speak more on a time where you took a risk, either in a career path or a business decision, and how it paid off or what you were able to learn from it?
I can go ahead and start. Yeah, that's a really great question. Thanks for asking it. For me, I think about certain stages where I did take risks in my career. The first and foremost that's very visible to me that I remember is choosing to go international, right? And I talked about my Portugal experience while I was in college, but even after I graduated and worked for Eli Lilly Company, I was sent to Singapore, right? And both of these required thinking about leaving something that creature of habit, leaving the Midwest lifestyle and expanding my boundaries and learning how to communicate with people from different perspectives, cultures, and languages. And I think from that experience, taking the risk from leaving home and going abroad, I feel like I learned a lot of skills, or I picked up a lot of skill sets that I'm very appreciative of, that has allowed me to be more effective in how I lead teams and manage teams now, and how I work in a global environment. The other areas where I feel like I took a risk was when going from individual contributor to leading a team, right? That itself is also a change. You go from just managing your workload and your piece of the puzzle to now thinking more strategically and then thinking about how do you get work done with others and being thoughtful about that. So that was another, I think, risk moment. And I think my most recent risk of coming back from LA back to Ohio and taking this awesome opportunity, which I think is a privilege, to lead one of Amgen's new manufacturing sites from a technology perspective. But it's a brand new domain for me. And it's coming back from 15 years in California back to Ohio. So it's going to be a change. And I consider that a risk, right? But in all of those situations, impact. You asked the question about what kind of impact or what did I learn from it. I think it made me more confident in my ability to work with ambiguity and not knowing what the next step could potentially be. It made me more confident in who I am and what I have to offer to the table. So I think what I would encourage those that are starting their careers and those that are still in their careers and looking for that next career move, really think about the risk. And it can be rewarding if you take it. Big risk, big reward, right? So that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I'll expand a little bit when I talked about moving to that director of corporate business strategy, because that in my mind was a huge risk for me, right? Like heavy financial. I'll be honest, I've taken one finance class and that was during my MBA, right? So I don't have a finance and accounting background, right? As engineers, we might know enough to be dangerous, but that's not our forte. This job was heavy on that, right? This job was like you're in front of the executives all the time. I got moved to the 8th floor in our office building, and that's where all the executives sit. So total different, I would say, vibe on that floor compared to where I was sitting before. And just the stress in knowing that I had a really good team that I was managing and I could depend on them, but it was that trust factor, right? And making sure that I formed that trust with those folks that were reporting to me right away, because they were the ones that were going to make me successful, right? If I was going to shine in this role, it was going to be because of my team. And so it was scary. It was daunting. The first time I remember I had to go in and present to the CEO and every other executive at the strategy council, I was sweating it. Like I was super nervous. And the other side was it was, you know, in executive presentation classes, right, they teach you less is more, right? Like a lot of pictures, so you can talk to the slide. This was the complete opposite. The CEO and the CFO at the time, they liked words on a slide. Total foreign me, like, because I felt like my talk track, they could read it, right? Like, what was I going to present? And I'll be honest, I kind of fumbled a little bit because I was nervous. It wasn't what I was expecting. But you know what? My leader, the VP I reported to, he's like, don't worry about it. It's a learning process. They knew, like, they okayed you in this role. They know this is a development role for you. So, you know, the company also took a risk on me putting me in there, and it was really for my development. And like I said, I wasn't even in that role 5-6 months, and they're telling me that they're moving me already, right? It just, so sometimes the risk pays off, and you just have to go with it, knowing that you're going to make some mistakes, and it's okay. And there's a reason why they might ask you to do something, and it's you just have to say yes, right? If they tap you on the shoulder, you don't say no, you say yes.
Yeah, so a little probably more specific. When I think back on my career, the first 2 years at Swayjock, I was in a rotational program, which I think is still quite popular today as you guys are looking to enter the workforce. But you know, at the end of that program, I had a choice to make on if I wanted to stay as an individual contributor in an engineering role or move into a leadership role. And I wasn't 100% sure. I thought I wanted to go down the leadership path. At the time, the leadership openings were for production supervision on an off shift. So when you're 23 years old, going to third shift doesn't seem like the most exciting thing in the world. And so I personally felt that I was taking a risk to do that. I knew that I wasn't going to have support, right? You don't have the same functional support that you would have on first shift. You don't have a lot of your leaders there to help you along the way, to coach you along the way. So I took the risk, went to third shift. And for me, the impact was, yes, I want to continue on my leadership journey. Yes, this is difficult. It's not easy when you don't get a book that tells you this is how you become a leader, right? You got to figure it out along the way. You got to navigate the gray. You got to learn how to solve the problems. You're going to have difficult conversations. That first conversation when an associate is going through something difficult in their life, you know, like how you handle that, how you're able to help them and get them the resources and not cross the boundary of what you feel is appropriate empathy as a human being, but you really need to be a leader and represent the organization. Like just learning basics about that, you know, I felt created a basic foundation and toolkit for me that as I moved on to, you know, further leadership opportunities, I felt pretty confident. And I would also say do risks like that early, like whether it's the international travel, whether it's off shifts, like do the things early because life goes fast and the challenges only get bigger. So being able to do that now, I could never imagine with a husband and 2 young children being on a third shift. So I'm so happy I got that experience and I got it early and kind of out of the way so that it's something I can look back on and cherish for sure.
Taking a risk is scary, but that's great to hear the positive impact it's all had on you guys. Can you describe how mentors were helpful in your career development?
So I'll start on that question. So I think mentors are huge. They've had a huge impact on my career. And when I think about mentors, you have different needs from different mentors at different points in your career. And so when I talk about my career now, I have more of what I call my board of director mentors, right? I just don't have one person. I have multiple people that I mentor with, right? That are my mentors because different people are really good at certain things. And I know my weaknesses and my opportunities, and I go find others that I can learn from, that they can help me improve my weaknesses and opportunities. You know, so things have changed over time, right? I think when I think back to prior to being a leader, I was mentoring with people at US Cellular who were seen as really good leaders. I think now a lot of my mentoring, when I think of my board of director, has to do with executive presence, executive communication, and even more collaboration and building relationships. I pride myself on being strong in that, but I can always do better. And so I also challenge people to think outside of the box for their mentors. Like they don't always have to work at your company. I would say at least half the people I mentor with don't work at US Cellular, and there's a reason for that, right? Because sometimes there are difficult situations that I want to get advice from my mentors, and so having somebody who's outside of the company who might not know all the parties and not, you know, spill the beans per se is really important to me as well. And so, you know, the best thing I can stretch is your mentors change over time, and mine definitely have. And, you know, the more you progress in your career, I would encourage everybody to get yourself a board of directors because I think it really helps elevate you and it allows you to work on the things very pointedly with somebody versus, you know, high level. So.
And just to add, Amy, I think that's a really great perspective. And just to add and pull that thread a little bit more, you know, similarly, I have a board of directors of various folks that I consider my faithful mentors, right? And they have changed over time as well. But earlier in my career, I looked for folks that were like just like me, same type of, you know, technical background, female, potentially Indian. Like those were very important to me because, you know, to have someone in a mentorship that looked like you, had similar experiences, it gives you that comfort. But to Amy's point, it is so important to diversify that as you move through your career. I also think that one thing I do want to relay is that mentorship is important, just as much as sponsorship. And for those that don't know the difference between that, sponsorship is usually those folks that tend to be more senior in the company or organization that are looking to help you make those career moves, right? And help you elevate, whether it's elevation or laterals or what have you, they're there to usually help you. Sometimes you don't know who your sponsors are. They could be, and these are the folks that are usually talking behind closed doors when the talent opportunities come up and everything. So what I always recommend to all my mentees and even to myself is make sure you show up every time and bring your great ideas to the table and bring your make sure you find venues to showcase your talents and skill sets, because you don't know who's watching and who's getting an impression about you, right? And I think that's very important to recognize that. And some sponsors might be very visible to you, but some of them may not be. So just keep that in mind. And then the power of networking. I think as much as mentorship and sponsorship are important, networking is also important. And to Amy's point, it's important to go outside of just your company or just your function, broaden that. So get involved with industries, opportunities or other, like for example, I sit on non-for-profit boards, right? That's another way to build networks outside of just your industry or expertise, because those diverse perspectives can help you think outside of the box as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. That's a great perspective. What is one piece of advice you wish you could go back in time and tell yourself when you were first entering the workforce?
Yeah, I can start. So if I had to go back and tell my 22-year-old self, what would be the biggest thing that sticks out is to allow yourself the time to learn and get settled. So, I mentioned the creature of habit thing. I 14 years at Swagelok, I still don't even take my own advice here, but I've been working with a coach for leadership development. And the one thing that she shared with me was not only coming out of an engineering and technical background, but also being in a manufacturing industry, there's a tendency for women to feel like they have to be perfect just to get to the same baseline as a male counterpart. And that may or may not be true. It certainly is in my case. I feel like I have to be perfect. So in all these roles that I've taken, I felt like right out of the gate, day one, I need to be operating at perfection just to be successful. And really talking through why that is, there's a lot of confidence. I lack confidence, which can be surprising to some, but I get that imposter syndrome, you can't do this. There's no way. People are gonna know I'm not gonna be able to do it. And then they're gonna tell me to take a hike. But I think giving yourself that opportunity, that space to learn, to really leverage your network and your peers. So, Swagelok's been great. Nobody's put that pressure on me. I put it on myself. And I feel like that's one piece of advice I wish I had told myself before, so I could get that little voice out and I could really handle things a lot more confidently. And, again, I know how to do things. I know how to figure things out. So just have some time and patience to do it.
I think the one thing that I would go back and tell myself is, and Luis and I were talking about this last night, is the perfect life, right? Thinking that I'm going to have a job that I work 8 to 5, then I'm going to go home, have dinner with my perfect family, and be able to watch some TV and go to bed and do it all over again. And life is messy, right? And, we talk about we're talking about our careers here, but then you start adding in, you have a husband or partner, you add a kid or two, and life is crazy. And I'll be the first person to tell you, I'm a soccer mom. I'm taking my computer and I'm tethering my phone during soccer practice, and in my car taking phone work calls, right? Because that's what I have to do to make it happen. And to me, go with the flow, right? Life is messy and things are gonna happen, and just, it's all gonna be just a bump, and you just, pick yourself up, move along, and you go and you keep moving forward. And I think when I graduated, I kind of had the same mentality. I'm like, I'm gonna have my first job. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna get my first apartment, and life happens and things happen, and you might deviate from the plan that you think you have, and it's all okay.
That's great advice. I think for me, the main advice that I would give all of you, and I still give myself, is taking the time to reflect on what does success mean to you, right? And what I mean by that is that all of us have various different notions of what success means, right? For some of us, it's the titles. For some of us, it's the pay. For some of us, it's a balance, right? It's a balance of family, hobbies, friends, career, right? And what I would just recommend is every 3 to 5 years, check in on what you consider your what you consider success to be, because I also think that also lights up the path of what your next career moves and decisions you make in your career, right? And I think that's very important advice that I got, I wish I got it even earlier than I did, but it's something that I still live by to this day. And then the other piece of advice I give is just be with people, organizations, and teams that respect and value you, right? Life, as someone said up here, life is too short, right? And Miami gives you such awesome tools to make an impact. The world's your oyster. And I really think that taking that time to make sure that you're in the right place where you feel like you belong. And so don't sell yourself short. And that's my advice.
Awesome. That's great advice, considering all of us will probably be entering the workforce within the next couple of years. We do have some time to open it up to all of you. If anyone has a question or two, we have about 10 minutes left. Yes.
Have you ever faced a situation where maybe like your opinion or perspective doesn't carry as much weight as your male counterpart? And what advice would you give if someone faced a situation like that?
Disha was touching on it earlier. I think in the situations that's happened in my career, it's been an age gap. It's been an experience and age where my perspective may not carry as much weight as the person that's been here for 20, 30 years, right? So, I think the biggest piece of advice that I've learned or that's helped me has been continuing to leverage like people around you, continuing to have courageous conversations with those folks on, hey, here's an idea, just curious on, from your perspective. You almost have to work with those types of individuals to say, hey, I hear you too, and I want to get your perspective if I'm missing something, but is there something in my idea or thinking that you could help influence? It's a backwards way almost to get their perspective and make them feel connected, but I found that has helped. But that's probably the biggest opportunity was with really an age and experience gap, not so much the male and female.
I've been in situations where I've made viewpoints or perspectives, and then I notice like 5 minutes later, a male counterpart might echo that same thing, maybe in a different way or how that person delivered it, right? What I've come to learn as a strategy is usually that's not the only meeting I'll ever be in with those people. So what I start to do behind the scenes is strategize in the context of having my supporters around me in that same meeting to echo my opinion and bring that credibility back to me, if that makes sense. So learning how to figure out who's on your team that are your supporters and your advocates, because those are the folks that sometimes will help re-echo echo your words that you had already said and really give the credit back to you. I've only been in those situations very far and few between. But I mean, those are some potential strategies or tools you could utilize in the future.
I would just add on to that is network, build your relationships. And so one of the things that's helped me be very successful at US Cellular is I build relationships with people, even if I don't have a project or a reason to meet with them. Back when we were in the office, I'd be like, hey, let's go over to Starbucks and grab a coffee, right? And I kept up that network. So when I did have a situation, right, like my supporters were there, I had a relationship with them. And even just to get things done at a company, it's all about relationships. And you have to get up out of your seat or up off of your computer now and go have those conversations. And I think it's been interesting in the pandemic, right? Everything went virtual, and how do you keep that up? How do you keep networking up? And I've managed to do it. I schedule 5, 10, 15-minute calls with people, like at 8 a.m. in the morning. Let's catch up over coffee, and it's the one thing I think that's helped me in my career.
Awesome. Does anyone else have a question? I could ask another one. What are the soft skills that you've leveraged the most in your career? I know we talked about some technical advancements, but
I can start. So, yeah, soft skills, especially when you get to the leader level, are extremely important. So it's everything from empathy. Louise and I talked about this in her class last fall about emotions, like understanding your emotions, how you feel, how your leader might feel, how your team feels, and then, making sure that you come across in the right way. It to me it goes back to relationships and being genuine and coming across as your authentic self. I can tell right away when I'm working with somebody if they're putting up a face and they're trying to be somebody that they're not. And I think, in today's world, being your authentic self, being able to build those relationships and that trust, understanding empathy and emotion are really important to being successful.
Yeah, I can't express enough like how communication is critical. So it doesn't matter, right, if you're an individual contributor or you're in a leadership position, but being able to communicate with peers, with those that might report to you, with those that are above you is absolutely critical because you have to adapt your message. And then, as Amy was saying, like how you bring in those emotions into that conversation, watching your tone, depending on the situation, because there's going to be difficult conversations that you always have to have, right? So you have to make sure that you're prepared and you're able to communicate in all of those situations. So I feel like I'm constantly thinking about that in the back of my mind because whether it's a presentation and it's information I'm sharing or it's a coaching conversation, like I have to adapt my communication skills. And quite honestly, when we look at hiring, I know that people that have degrees in engineering, they're probably some pretty smart students. Those soft skills, whether it's the emotional regulation, whether it's the communication, the collaboration, those are difficult things to teach someone to do. So when you see those demonstrated and demonstrated well, I know that it becomes a lot easier to teach someone how to do some of the technical work for that specific company or industry.
What else I would add is just having the self-awareness of where you stand with your global awareness and diversity, inclusion, and belonging, right? I think that's an important piece too for success. If you're building teams, you want diverse talent on your teams. When you're building a product, it's not just one end user you're looking at. You're most likely building that product for multiple end users, right? So I think the piece of how do you cultivate on your teams, in your organizations, and even within yourself, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, because I think that will ultimately be a very nice, it's an art, but it's a nice skill set to have. And it will propel you forward, especially in the global world that we live in today.
Awesome. It looks like we're just about out of time, but I wanted to thank everyone for coming today. I know you had a long day of panels, but it was so great to hear from these three women, their experiences and advice. And you're welcome to come up and ask questions. We'll stay. We have about 3 minutes left. I also wanted to invite you all to join Miami faculty and alum for a social hour immediately following this panel. But yeah, thank you all for coming. And if we could give them all a round of applause.